This is Jody Trana with Chapter 7, Part 2 of Business Finance. In Chapter 7, we're learning how to measure risk and return. On past performance, it can be pretty straightforward, as we can see exactly what happened. We can measure the past performance returns either through our actual cash or realized return, or as a rate of return, which is a relationship between the realized return and our original investment. Although we often want to know our past performance, it can be very powerful for us to be able to estimate future performance of an investment. We do that by analyzing the expected rate of return. We can also measure potential risk through the variance and the standard deviation. Let's review briefly the cash or realized return on one share of stock that we purchased from Apple for $95 and then sold later for $115. The cash or realized value is $20. That's the difference between our original investment and the amount of money that we made. To determine the rate of return, we take that amount divided by our beginning price, our original investment of $95. That gave us a rate of return of 21%. It's pretty common that when we invest in stock, we don't just hold it for one period and then get rid of it. We'll often hold it for a number of years. When we do that, we want to see our average rate of return on the investment. Let's assume that we held that same stock for 3 years. First of all, we're going to take a look at our cash or realized return for each year. You'll remember that the end of year 1, our cash return was $20. That's the difference between the original price of $95 and the amount that it was valued at the end of year 1, which was $115. Now let's say by the end of year 2, the shares were valued at $120 apiece. That gives us an additional $5 cash return. And at the end of year 3, it goes up again to $130, which reveals a $10 cash return for year 3. Here we're going to calculate annual rates of return. The first one is 21%, which we've worked from before. That takes the $20 and divides it by the original investment of $95. In year 2, you can see that we have a 4% rate of return. That uses the return of $5 and divides it by the beginning of the year price for year 2, which was our end of the year price for year 1 of $115. 5 divided by 115 is around 4%. For the third year, we take our $10 cash return and divide that by our beginning of the year 3 amount, which is $120. 10 divided by 120 is around 8%. Now that we've calculated an annual rate of return for each one of these years that we've owned this Apple stock, we can take an average. The average is simply calculated by taking all of these 3 years' rate of return and adding them up and dividing it by the number of years we've held this stock, which is 3. 21 plus 4 plus 8 is 33%. Divided by 3 years is 11% annual average. Let's take a look at 2 ways to calculate the rates of return on an investment. First of all, we'll look at the arithmetic average, and then we'll look at the geometric or the compound average. Both the arithmetic average and the geometric average are important, and they're both correct, but they report 2 different things. The geometric average takes into account the compounding that occurs from period to period. Because of this, many investors usually consider the geometric average a more accurate measure of return. But the arithmetic average does have its use and its place. Let's take a look at a scenario in which we have held a stock for 2 years. For the first year, our beginning stock price was $100. At the end of the year, it was valued at $150. So that's our beginning stock price for year 2, $150. Unfortunately, at the end of year 2, our stock price was only worth $75. Just like we did in our previous Apple example, we're going to calculate the annual rate of return and then we're going to average them. For year 1, we had a 50% rate of return. That would be our return, which is the difference between these two stock prices, which is $50, divided by our beginning stock price of $100. Year 2, however, our ending stock price is $75. So our cash return is a negative 75. If we take that amount and divide it by the year 2's beginning stock price of 150, we end up with a negative rate of return of 50%. Using the arithmetic average, you can see that once we add year 1 and year 2 and divide it by 2, Using the arithmetic average, you can see that once we add year 1 and year 2 and divide it by 2, we come up with a 0% arithmetic average. 0% may not reflect the actual return that we received on this stock purchase, but it definitely does tell us the average of the 2 years. If we were to take that same information and use our geometric average calculation, let's see what we would come up with. Because the geometric average takes compounding and the time value of money into account, our geometric average rate of return is negative 13.4% on this stock. Where the arithmetic average answers the question, what was the average of the yearly rates of return? The geometric average answers the question, what was the growth rate of the investment? Let's look and see how the geometric average rate of return is calculated. Let's look and see how the geometric average rate of return is calculated. It looks complex, but it really isn't. We're going to take the rate of return for every year. You can see in our equation that we're using the 50% rate of return for year 1, which shows as a decimal of 0.5, and we're taking the negative 50% rate of return from year 2, which shows as a negative 0.5 decimal. To each one of these numbers, we add the number 1. This helps to avoid any problems with negative percentages like we have in year 2. Then we multiply all of the rates of return plus 1, and then raise this product to the power of 1 divided by the number of years in the series. For this problem, it is 1 divided by 2, since we have 2 years of data. Finally, we subtract 1 from the result, since we've added 1 previously to all the years' rates of return. When trying to choose the right average equation, think about what you need to know from your evaluation. The arithmetic average rate of return is going to tell you the average rate of your return over a period of time. It's just calculating the average. And if you don't have very volatile numbers, it might work just fine. It's also a little bit easier to do in your head or on the fly. The geometric average rate of return should be used when we're looking for more of a time value of money answer, and we want to take into consideration the compounding of the growth over time.